We'll call this morning's meeting to order. First thing on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. We've got some, I don't know if those additions or not from each department for the budget. Are those additions or is it just,
That's just information.
that's the same as what's in there,
I
okay?
make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Give it a motion by Jenny, second by Kevin to approve the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Do we have anything from citizens to be heard? Nothing on that?
Mr. Chair.
We'll approve, to go to the approval of payment of bills and vouchers.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion by Grant, second by Jim. Approve the bills, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and with that, Kathy, right on time there, Kathy.
Thank you, good, I'm glad.
You can take a seat up here.
Oh, I can?
Yes.
You ready for me?
Yes, if you want to bring Cheryl and Jamie, whatever. Going to go over our public health director, Kathy McKay, will cover the COVID-19 statistics for this last week.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I passed out our trend of numbers that we continue to follow, the number of cases in Clay County. You can see now the confirmed cases are 625. So, you know, it's a gradual climb, but you know, we expect that with some testing and things, so not alarming at all. The numbers that are out of isolation or of recovered are the 554, so we still have 33 active cases, which kind of goes up and down depending on the numbers tested. So 33 that we're following, and then the deaths have remained the same for the last few weeks, so we haven't had any increase in deaths in Clay County. In Minnesota, we have 42,700 positive cases. I don't think you have that on your sheet. 37,200 no longer need isolation. So those numbers are fairly steady as well. 4,000 of those numbers were healthcare workers. They had 1,504 deaths in Minnesota. 1,172 were from congregate care, long-term care facilities and others, which is low compared to most of the other states. And hospitalizations have been remaining low as well throughout Minnesota. And the hospitalizations and in Sanford locally continue to be stable. So they average maybe around 4 to 12 patients that are COVID related. So their numbers have remained low, which is good. And the numbers in ICU currently right now are only 4. So that's good as well. I don't have the numbers of Essentia, but those numbers have remained low also. So it's good that we're not on an upward trend like we see in some of the other parts of.
Kathy, when you say active cases, are those cases that are all in the hospital or?
On the
Like we
the
got
active-
33 active cases at Lake. Are they all in the hospital then? or-
No, those are ones that are positive that we are following. We're doing case investigation on those, and then contact tracing on the contacts, but that's 33 cases that are just currently right now we are following in Clay County.
Do we have an idea how many are in the hospital concerning this, or do?
We don't know how many of Clay County residents are in the hospital, but we don't, as far as I recall from our Red Cap, it's a system that the Minnesota Department of Health uses. I don't remember any that are hospitalized that we are following from Clay County. So these
good.
are all just at home recovering.
Very
We
good.
see our numbers of the young people are rising,
Yes.
not only in our county, but across the country, because I think just there's I think they're not following all of the guidelines, is most of what they're seeing across the nation, that they're really you know, it's the COVID fatigue is what they call it, and they're tired of wearing masks, and they're tired of social distancing, so we see large numbers of those increasing. It's not so worrisome for youth to get COVID as much as it is people with chronic health conditions or the elderly. However, they're spreaders, so they tend to then spread to those that are more susceptible. So, you know, that's a concern, and we'll have that concern for a while as we have our college kids returning and schools in session. So we're going to see, we expect to see a bit more of that. And Cheryl will talk a little bit about the colleges and the plans, so.
Can I ask a question quick?
Sure.
I have our sheet that you handed out last week and then this week's, and I'm noticing that some of the numbers are tweaked a little bit in terms of active cases. Last week I thought there was 20 active cases, but now it says there was 39 active cases. Or is there a lag in how that information is reported?
Yes, there is a lag in when it, so we get the current ones, but there's a lag in the numbers that they are putting down across the state in red cap. So there is a bit of a lag. We're also seeing a little bit of lag between reporting across the river too. So we're noticing there's a little bit of a lag from the North Dakota reports to get to Minnesota. So those are the discrepancies in those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, go ahead, Cheryl, with the planning of.
Good morning. So as I mentioned last week, we were having some meetings with our higher ed entities, and that has continued. There was a representative from Minnesota Department of Health that came to Moorhead yesterday and met on 2 of the campuses, so we did a virtual meeting with them. And just to help guide them through the guidance, because sometimes some of that can be a bit confusing for schools, and to answer questions. Of course, one of the questions that came up was about contact tracing for our college students. And so as Kathy and I and Jamie explained to them that we are doing a case investigation and contact tracing at Public Health, but the higher ed entities could be a huge asset for us, because if their students are living on campus, they certainly have the information of what classes that student may be attending, if they're sharing a dorm room with another student, and what their activities are on campus to assist us with expediting that case investigation. Also wanted to mention that I've also reached out to our K-12 school districts in Clay County, and I am a school nurse for the Ulen-Hittedal district, and so I've had a few conversations with the superintendent up there and in our planning for fall and what that's going to look like for them, because there has been guidance that has come out between Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota Department of Health. But as we have learned over the last 5 months, information with this virus changes frequently, and so there may be some revisions to that guidance, and we can serve as a huge resource for those school districts in helping them with their planning.
Are the colleges planning on doing anything as far as, I don't know, because I always thought that the first year as a freshman, you were supposed to stay in the dormitories if you're from out of town or whatever. Is that requirement still going to be, do you know, if that's been discussed at all?
Not necessarily. You know, they're working through some of the things on their own, but they, you know, are looking at, especially if a student becomes ill, if they live locally or within a region that isn't too far of a distance, that student may be able to return to their home address with their parents or wherever their permanent home is for that duration, to avoid you know, having to stay at the school in a room by themselves.
Okay.
So yeah, it's not confirmed yet, for sure. So they're planning that, but I suspect that will not be a requirement.
In terms of, I'd heard some issues on the news in regards to international students and online education and what the requirement is. Do you have any numbers in terms of what the percentage of international students the universities have?
I apologize, but I don't have that number.
We can get those numbers though, because we'll be meeting with the colleges on a regular basis, so
Yes.
we can get the number of international students that they have typically and what they're predicting for this
Because
fall.
my guess would be in terms of landlords, there's a large percentage of
Right. And on
students
both
that could affect it.
MSUM and Concordia campuses, some of those international students from last year were unable to return home at the end of the spring semester,
Right.
and so have stayed on campus during this time.
Thank you.
And just to add to that, the K-12, they do have 3 scenarios that MDE put out. So it's the in-person learning for all students. There's the hybrid learning, so with social distancing and capacity limits, and then also complete distance learning. So they have 3 scenarios, and they will base that dependent upon what is happening in our community at that time. So whether they determine that they need to not have any in-person or they can do partial in-person, they're working on all of those scenarios. And then Jamie will talk a little bit about masking, et cetera.
Good morning. I just want to highlight some of the things that we've talked about and what we've seen over the past week as a part of our meetings with both the state and the local level. Apologize for my voice. I think I've been talking to a voicemail and our computer things too much because everything is virtual. But so one of the things I just want to say is that we have a very strong team, as we've talked about, doing case investigations. And so I think that's a critical piece of why we have been so successful in our community in terms of controlling spread. Although our cases continue to rise, we've got just a little bit of, I think about 40 cases that we've seen from before the 4th of July till right now, and so we're getting very close to that 14-day window. And so I think that's pretty good. And so there's 2 things. Basically, because of the case investigations that we're doing locally, we're responding quickly, and we're actually when people are reaching out to public health and saying, okay, I got tested, we're asking them to get back to us as soon as they can when they get their test results. That allows us to respond a little bit quicker than when it goes through the Minnesota Department of Health and goes into what we call our queue of cases. And so we've been more timely in terms of responding, and I think that's an excellent reason why we have seen a good response. Another thing is that the guidance from Minnesota Department of Health has been very good. So our staff that are working doing the case investigations, what they're getting when they call and talk with people is they're getting, yep, my employer knows what to do. Yes, I was at a gathering for the 4th of July, but my employer is set. So I think the guidance, and even though we are still out and engaged in the community and businesses are opening, we are maintaining that social distancing, and that's a big part of why we're seeing success. They're ready now and they're prepared. So looking at our long-term care, we haven't had any additional deaths since that time frame as well. So they've got it down and they know what they're doing. They're starting to open up our long-term care for visitations, but they're very well thought out and planned. They're communicating well with families in terms of what the expectations are. But that being said, there is still research out there is starting to point to the fact that even though we are not symptomatic, we are spreading the disease. And then what was stated yesterday at one of our calls is that it's looking like we may even be peaking before we actually have symptoms in terms of our contagiousness. So can't stress enough how important the social distancing is. Unfortunately, masking has become very political, but there is research to show that the masking is helpful. There are some of there's some pressure or advisement for the governor in Minnesota that's coming from the Minnesota Medical Association, the Minnesota Nurses Association, to actually consider a requirement for masking in public settings. There is the city of Winona, Rochester, Mankato, and Edina that have enacted mask requirements. And then there's the city of Duluth and St. Cloud that are considering it. So I think, again, I know that's political, but just so that you're aware of that discussion is happening and that there is some advisement coming from the Medical Association and the Nurses Association in Minnesota. Social distancing, that is the best way that we can try to prevent that spread. And we need to continue to maintain that. It seemed like in the community, I don't know if you noticed that, but I noticed there was kind of a drop in mask use, and now there's an uptick in mask use again. But that general, I drive by the motor vehicle department every day coming to work, and they're clearly marked spots where they are supposed to keep their distance, and I think whatever we can do in order to make it easier for people to comply with that social distancing, I think that's an advantage, so. Basically, we've kind of shifted our focus from long-term care to working with schools, as Cheryl and Kathy talked about. There's excellent involvement in terms of making sure that we have options to make sure that our students return safely, and I think there's a lot of work being done behind the scenes. So that's pretty much, I probably said too much opinion stuff, sorry about that.
Well, when we do the social distancing, like we are here and stuff like that, you feel the masking should be utilized? And I mean, if you even look at our church sometimes, we don't have very many members there right now, but we're 15, 20 feet apart, we're all sitting there with masks on, and I don't know, is the mask doing any good there, or?
I think that's basically what the science is looking at, is that we try to stay you saw how I sat next to Kathy a little too close and then I scooted over again? That's basically, it's difficult. If it's not marked out for us, it's difficult. I understand what you're saying, for my rural community also, the churches are looking at, and we just have to constantly remind people, it doesn't mean just 6 feet this way, but it means that 360 degree, but it's difficult to maintain, so that's why if you go into a store and you can't maintain that distance, the mask is helping to protect all of us around. It's an extra precaution because you never know where you're going to end up coughing, and then the more like I'm projecting my voice because I'm hoarse today, the more I project my voice, the more the particles come out. If I happen to be infectious and I don't know it, that's how the spread happens.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
So just to add, like Jamie mentioned, so in churches, when people are singing, the particles go further. So the science is showing that if you sing, you're hollering, you're projecting your voice, that particles will go farther than 6 feet. So that's part of that. The mask is the second layer of protection. So they are recommending that. And then the exposure time is being within 6 feet for 15 minutes or longer. So if you are within 6 feet for 5 minutes or even 10, that's not an exposure. But it's 15 minutes or longer is the time frame for someone to be exposed to the virus.
Okay. Kevin?
Thank you. Kathy or any one of you will want to take this one. I want to go back to the K-12 for a minute. And, there's all kinds of discussion now about schools and school openings and kids and transferring of the virus. You get to the point where you don't know who or what you should believe anymore. Has public health come out, whether it's through the CDC or whatever, with confirmation about this, where kids aren't likely transfers of the disease, and by what age would it mean? Is it kindergarten to grade 4, or is it kindergarten to grade 6? Where's the cutoff on that? Where all of a sudden maybe they don't transfer, now they do, or less likely to transfer, I should probably say. I'm assuming any one of them could transfer, but so is there any information on that?
They don't have a specific age category at this point. They're still studying that. So at what age, when you are positive, will you be able to transfer or spread?
Mm-hmm.
However, we do have some daycares that have some positive kids. So we're really conscientious of that, because if there's more than one kid, then they clearly have spread that to each other. So that's a concern. And then spreading it to adults. I know there's some teachers that have some concerns, who have some health issues,
Right.
and the concern is to experience that
I guess
spread.
I'm just trying to
Yeah, there isn't an age category where they're saying no.
weed through and trying to get to
Yeah,
the direct science of it. That's, they
right.
might be able to have strong indications that maybe kids, through the 4th grade
Yeah.
are much less likely to transfer it, even if they do carry it. I don't know, so I
No,
just
and
put that out
and
there
that's
as
still
a
being-
as a question for the public. And then if I can just switch a little bit, I read an article yesterday in the FM Extra about an individual who had contacted, came down with the virus and now is donating plasma. And in the article, it said that that could actually help 5 other people who might be in intensive care in terms of the, the therapeutic piece of. So if that's the case, are we encouraging, now I see here that we've had 625 confirmed cases in Clay County. When we know they're no longer carriers, do we encourage them to look at donating plasma? Is that part of our process, or could it be, or should it be?
It hasn't been, and the recommendations usually are from their healthcare providers. If they are going to recommend that they think about that, it's not part of the process for our contact tracers or our case investigators. So MDH is not stating that we should encourage or push that. It's optional, but we don't bring that up, but that's certainly
So we don't know if healthcare providers have that as a list of items that they should talk to their patient about.
Right, exactly, yeah, and my understanding is that's not a regular thing that they're discussing, so. But that certainly is a viable option for people that have been positive, if they check with their healthcare provider and encourage that, but not as a typical process.
I know that Vitalent, which is our local blood services, has definitely done some advertising and encouraging people who have recovered from COVID-19 to contact them to see if they could possibly be a candidate to donate plasma.
Yeah, I guess, from my standpoint, somebody who may have had COVID might have other conditions that would not allow them to donate. But I would certainly think that, when we're seeing, especially the elderly who get this, and if it's a therapeutic that can help them, we should be, I think we should be promoting any options out there that could assist in that regard. So I'll leave it at that.
Any questions?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
If I could just briefly follow up on Jamie's comment on masks, just from a county perspective. Well, first of all, I think I'd like to just acknowledge the work of Kathy and her staff. We're going on nearly 5 months now, and for her incident command team, it doesn't end on Friday at 4:30. This is 7 days a week into the evenings, and we're just extremely fortunate to have Kathy and her staff do the work that they're doing and keeping us up to date and being able to make the decisions that we do based on that information. So I just wanted to acknowledge their great work. Secondly, I just want to comment, last week, the Supreme Court in Minnesota put out an administrative order that requires citizens and staff who are participating in any court type of business here in the county to wear masks. So anybody that's court administration, well, we're not having jury trials yet. If you're part of the jury, if you're coming to watch, you are required now to wear a mask, and we do have masks at the front. That's been provided by the state. And so just for our citizens, if they're coming to the front and they're not wearing their own, just to be aware that that's something that they'll be asked to put on while they're here when they're conducting any kind of court business.
Thank you. Anything additional?
And just a quick, for Commissioner Haney, they did cancel the press conference for tomorrow, so.
Okay.
And just came up late last night that they decided to cancel, so.
Well, thanks for letting me know.
All righty then. Thank you so much for keeping us updated, and thank you for your work in that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing we got the approval for a registered land survey in Oakport Township. Matt Jacobson, our planning director. Morning, Matt.
Morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. So you might be having some deja vu here because we did this a couple of months ago, but what you have is essentially a preliminary registered land survey. And typically this kind of, what the landowner is looking to do is essentially split tract A on your survey from tract B. Typically, this would be an administrative split, something that he would submit an application to our office, and we would just approve it, since he would meet all the density standards of and lot dimension standards in the county with this split. Because this is a Torrens property and not an abstract property, he's required to do a registered land survey, and a registered land survey requires approval from you as well.
So do we do the survey, or do they do the survey? Or?
They do the survey. The survey is essentially complete. This is basically the preliminary of what the survey will look like.
Okay, so we're just, if we do, we just approve this, you know, there's no cost to the county? then
No
do
cost to the
survey?
county, no. No.
Very good, okay. Any questions for Matt? All right,
I move approval of the,
Second.
you got a motion by Kevin, second by Grant to approve the registered land survey in Oak Park Township. Any further discussion? All in favor?
aye.
Pass, excuse me, opposed, motion passes.
Thank you all.
With that, we'll go into Mark, who, talking to him this week, he had some further look at some of his vehicles that we approved last week, and he'd like to change some of that stuff, so we'll go into that.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for having me this morning. After last meeting, I ended up talking to our patrol sergeant, who's also our canine handler, Sergeant Nelson, along with Lieutenant Tweeten. They both expressed interest in different vehicles. The reason I'm here today is because my assumption was the vehicles I presented last week is what they wanted, and that really wasn't the case. And they both put some fairly good arguments forward as to the reasons for the change. For example, Deputy Nelson would prefer a Tahoe just for space. He currently operates a canine. We have sheriff's office equipment, canine equipment in his car, and then we're ordering more protective gear for him, which he is right now full. He wouldn't be able to put anything else in his car. Currently, he has a large box in the back of his car that covers his spare tire. If he got a flat tire somewhere in the rural area, he wouldn't be able to get his tire out. He needs to have his tire in that particular spot. It's part of the crash rating, so we can't take it out and put it somewhere else. So going to a Tahoe would offer him more space. It'd be better suited. The tire comes out from underneath. There are benefits for him to have that particular vehicle with the canine. Secondly, with Lieutenant Tweeten in the EM position, he is hauling quite a few things from ATVs to UTVs. Sometimes our EM truck is being used for other purposes as well, hauling the large EM trailer that we had just purchased. Currently, right now in the COVID, Gabe is hauling a lot of different things, and his space is limited as well in his car, so it would be nice to provide him with that extra space. The change between the two would be an additional, what did I look here, for Corby it'd be an additional $4,900, and then for the pickup for Gabe, it's an additional, I believe, $8,000, so we're looking at $9,215 additional.
Mr. Chair, I think the request makes sense to me for both those positions. I can see the need for those vehicles, so I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second. Okay, we've got a motion by Grant, second by Jim, to approve the change in the request from last week. Any further discussion?
I would imagine the pickup will have a covering on the back which allows them to lock it up.
It will, he'll have his choice. If he'd like to do a full topper,
Oh,
absolutely do that, or if he just wants to do a tonneau cover, we'd have a lock on it.
okay.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we're gonna go into budget presentations, and we're gonna start off with Information Services, Mark Sloan, who always comes in with a lower budget every year.
I try my best. Good morning.
Good
Before
morning.
I start talking about our budget, I thought I might do a quick recap of the Information Services Department itself. We would have had our presentation on that back in April, and when that didn't happen, so I just was quickly what we do. Information Services is a relatively small department. We have 3 full-time staff and a part-time staff. We have a web specialist, a GIS specialist, a GIS technician, which is part-time, and then myself. The emphasis with our department is handling of information, as it says in its name. Our sister department, Technology Services, who we work very closely with, handles the technology side, and we handle the presentation of the information to not only our staff, but our citizens and our partners across the county. The biggest pieces of our operation are our geographic information system, which is used by many organizations and people within us. Just a little recap here, we have 390 layers of information that we maintain. Last year, in 2019, we issued 287 new addresses, because that's one of the things we do, and that's not including what happened in the cities, but we have over 30,000 property parcels that we edit and keep maintained. So we're doing a lot of work on the GIS side to make sure that data is current, accurate, and is delivered to the users as best we can.
When you said you added that many addresses, 287 new addresses, is that including Moorhead, or, I mean?
No, that'd be outside Moorhead.
Outside of Moorhead, you added 200.
Yeah,
That's a big amount.
yeah, and most of them, small subdivision here or there or whatever, but it adds up over some
Okay,
bunch.
thank you.
The other major division we have is our website. Our website, just as some statistics here, in year 2019, we had over 2,000 pages of our website that we were edited, and we had 517,628 visits to our website. We track the number of visits to our site, and I brought a graphic. I don't know you won't be able to see it very well, but this tracks our visits by month, and way over here is April. So we were running about 36,000 visits a month was what we've been running at the last few years. April came, and we jumped to more than 73,000 visits a month, which has been consistent since then. So a whole bunch of our traffic moved online is what happened. So we've been working very diligently since then to make sure that we're presenting the information that people are looking for out there. And we actually get a report every month that tells us, all about our traffic and what things people are trying to see. And interesting tidbit of information is the number 1 page that people are looking for on our website. 11,000 people last month will look for it. Specifically, is our inmate roster. That's the top. That's what people really want. Followed by all the rest of it's motor vehicle related stuff. So, Information Services, our role is to provide the information to our staff and all the folks that might need it, and we try our best to make sure that we're doing that as efficiently as we can. Which leads me to talk about a little bit about our budget. Budgets are, every year we sit down and look. We really spend a lot of time looking at every place we spend money, where we spent it, and where we're planning to spend it, make sure it's something that is justifiable, and we want to make sure we do it as best we can as stewards of the taxpayers' money. This year, we kept our budget as flat as we could. We have a couple minor increases is all, just to basically adjust for the increasing costs. We have some things that just are costing a little more. We have no new requests. My total budget increase is about 3.8%, which is mostly due to we have a relatively new staff. In 2018, we replaced our entire staff except for myself. With those folks get steps, so the steps are what causes that, mostly what's causing that increase. So overall, we've tried to keep it as best we can and as stable as we can, and still estimate what it is we're going to need to spend money on a year and a half from now is really what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Any questions?
Mark? Well, I guess I'm glad to see that, that's just a matter of the salary, just the salary increases. Mark.
Mostly, yeah. We had a little minor increase in software and those kind of things, but we provide quite a bit of enterprise software, GIS and Adobe and the website, and there's a bunch of things we provide, and then those just start costing a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, that is a lot of, I know anytime we request stuff from you, you have it there right away, and it's, you do run a great department, and thank you so much for that. And,
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just one question for, so what does your travel normally consist of? Is it going for training or?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we spend our travel money on, is training. That's it. We'd asked in November, we came here and asked for permission to send our GIS specialist to the ESRI user conference, which is actually taking place this week, but it's virtual now, so we won't spend those funds this year, so we put enough money in it next year to make sure we can send her hopefully then.
Okay. Any
Thank
further
you.
questions?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for trying to keep your budget down there.
You're welcome.
I think as, Mr. Chair, I think just a comment as we're waiting, I think we're going to see a lot of these wage line items. It's probably going to have a little impact based on our study that was implemented effective.
Yes, it will. With that, we're going to go with the trash
A
talk.
little trash talk, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Kirk.
Garbage continues to pick up again. It's good to come before you. Our fund, our whole program is basically it's funded through what we call an enterprise fund. And an enterprise fund is different than some of the other budgets that you have come before you. Essentially, it doesn't apply against the entire budget of the county, and we run it as a business. It is a business, basically, is what it is. So I just want people to understand that our budget is basically funded through the enterprise fund.
So you just make your own money then? is that
We
right?
try. We
Okay.
try. We have a printing press out there, and we try and print as much as we can.
Okay.
Sometimes
Okay.
it's enough, but most of the time it's not. Essentially, it's funded, the enterprise fund is funded through a service fee, and the service fee is the number, the price that you pay on your property, which is basically $42 per parcel. For industrial property or commercial property, it goes up depending on the amount of garbage that they generate. It's also funded through this tipping fee. The tipping fee is, of course, the money that you pay when you take your garbage out to the landfill and you dump it at the landfill. And then we also have 2 state grants. We have a SCORE funding program that helps out with the recycling portion. We get about $180,000 from that. To give you an example, we pay $225,000 to City of Moorhead for the recycling, and we pay for the operational cost for all the cities in Clay County, and we also have 4 townships that we also fund as well. One of the things we did this last year, we were really concerned about the amount of money that was being spent on that and the impact it was having on the budget, so we put a cap on that this year to try and address that.
Just before you go on, it's interesting to hear you saying you charge $42 a month
$42, Mr. Chairman,
per parcel, I mean,
yeah, per year.
per year. Then I get a charge, each city or township charges each resident too, some more money for their garbage, right?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's the case. I think essentially the only charge that happens from the county perspective is the tipping fee. So if they bring their garbage out to the landfill, we charge a tipping fee. But if they bring their recyclables out to the landfill, they aren't charged for that. They aren't charged for any the electrical appliances like computers and things like that. They aren't charged for that. They aren't charged for any household hazardous waste type material. So the $42 that's charged is basically for capital cost. One of the things that we worked really hard on, and Kevin has really been really involved with this, is the tipping fees pay for the operational cost, and the service fees basically pay for the capital cost. So that's basically the way that whole thing is outlined.
Yeah. Mr. Chair, maybe another portion, an answer. So the $42 shows up on the property tax statement. You as a resident living in Dilworth, you also have probably a solid waste fee that the city of Dilworth charges you. That is to cover the tipping fees that they have to pay to bring this stuff to the landfill.
I just wanted the $42. I mean, what does $42 get me? I'm not trying to change your
No,
system.
Mr. Chairman.
I'm just trying to understand it.
If you recall, Mr. Chairman, what we tried to do for that exact reason recently, because we said, okay, why do you have one amount on your property tax and another amount? And so what I wanted, and Commissioner Wayland and we worked on this with them, is that what's on your property tax statement, that money goes towards the capital costs. In other words, landfill reconstruction, the equipment that's used out there to replace the equipment, that type of thing. The bond payments that we have to make when we do, for example, this $2.5 million, that comes out of that. What comes out of the tipping fee is all of the operational costs that you'll see in here for wages and all those other types of things.
Okay,
So-
that's what I want to explain to our citizens.
Sure.
I mean, that's what I wanted to get out there, what that $42 is for, and what our garbage.
And as
fees are for.
Commissioner Campbell mentioned, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Wayland and Commissioner Campbell, they worked very, very hard to try and get that as close as possible. And I think that it's worked out well, and it's done really, really well, and it provides clear transparency to the citizens out there. So I think it's a positive thing. Last year, we generated approximately 52,000 tons per year. Of that amount, about 8,400 tons we were obligated to take to Perham. And we've had a really tough time getting to that amount. And the reason primarily is that, well, it's twofold. The first is that if they don't want to have the garbage, then sometimes they back us off, or they don't accept the garbage at all. And we have a real tough time getting quality garbage for the Perham facility. So anything over 2 loads, they have real difficulty in accepting. And so as a result, we've had some tough times meeting that obligation. One of the things that we have just done recently, and based on Commissioner Campbell's request, is we had a spare trailer that it's got measles really bad all over it. It's pretty rusted out. But we rehabbed it the best we could. It cost about $15,000, which is considerably cheaper than a $90,000 trailer. And it's roadworthy now. And so what we intend to do is on days when Perham can't accept any waste, we'll load that up, and it'll take at least 18 tons. We'll store it, and then hopefully on the days that Perham can accept additional waste, we'll take 3 trailers over there instead of just the 2. So it'll help us get caught up somewhat, but it's been a challenge. I should point out the generation rate, that's just what we're looking at next year. It's a guess. Realistically, it could be more, it could be less. I expect that it'll probably be more. What we've seen, because the vid is we've seen a decrease in the generation of the commercial amount, but we've seen the residential amount go up. We've also seen, interestingly enough, and I think people that know this, we've also seen an increase in recycling of corrugated. And I think a lot of reason why is people are buying stuff from Amazon and getting things shipped to them. So
Sure.
It's been really, really pretty interesting. We recycled approximately 12,000 tons last year, and as I mentioned, we have all the cities in Clay County have a facility, and we also have 4 townships, so, we have pretty good participation. Obviously, we'd like to have more townships involved with this. We've had pretty good reception with the people that we've worked with, and I think that the people really appreciate it that have it, and obviously, we'd like to have some others work with it as well. As far as major things that happened this year or are happening, we are in the process right now, and Commissioner Whalen and Commissioner Campbell got out and got their feet dirty yesterday. Got a little dust in their hair. We had a prairie breeze yesterday, if you remember, about 25-mile-an-hour prairie breeze. But we're in the process of doing a cell expansion out there. It's going to be about a $2.5 to $3 million project. Essentially, what we're doing is we're expanding the capacity of the landfill. We hope to get 8 to 10 years additional capacity at the landfill. We're putting in 13 additional gas wells out there to try and help with the odor control and help with the flare. We're putting a new flare in. We're also going to be heating the building out there with the methane gas. So it's a fairly extensive project, a fairly big project. So we're pretty excited about it. As far as highlights of the budget, our budget staying pretty flat. I'd really like to raise the tipping fee and raise the service fee, but given the bid, we're not going to do that this year. But next year we'll probably have to take a harder look at it. The highlight, basically the big thing is that we have an internal service fund, which is for equipment replacement, and we're going to be putting $717,000 into that internal service fund. We had some different numbers that were in our original budget, but Lori took a look at it, and she thought $717,000 would be the more appropriate number. In addition,
Do you want to tell us which portion of your budget you're talking about here? You got
it may not be on the budget that you have. It may have been added later on. It may be a completely separate budget item.
You're saying that
$717,000 into.
is not really part of your budget, or?
It is part of the budget, yes, it is. But I don't think it's included in that particular budget. Originally what we'd had is we had about $200,000 in the budget that you guys.
So if I can, I guess I'd like to know because I just met with you on this, and
Yeah, after we had met, the salvage value, she had some issues with salvage value being included in it. And then as far as the way we figured it out, she had some other issues with it.
Page 76, Commissioners, is where the
thank you.
internal service.
Okay.
There it is. Oh, I see, 717,170.
Right.
Yep.
So that's one thing that has changed. We, as I said, last year we did not have that amount, but this year we got a little closer, a little more accurate. The other change that we're having with the budget, a major change or concern, I guess, is we're having one additional staff at the landfill, and that's basically a truck driver that y'all approved a couple of weeks ago. That's worked out very, very well, and it's been a good addition for us. The other thing, and I always like to mention this, and I think it's pretty important people understand, I mean, we're the only department that gives money to the general fund. We give $120,000 on an annual basis to the general fund, and we do so very, very happily.
That's because you're also the only enterprise fund.
Well, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Just thought you'd add that in there.
Well.
As far as this next year, what do we have going on next year? It's the continual transfer station project. There has been an agreement between the House, the Senate, and the Governor's Office for the bonding bill. We are part of the bonding bill for $7.5 million. There's going to be a hearing today at the Ways and Means Committee in the House, which is the first step. It's a positive step. A couple of potential hiccups You know, there's some folks that are concerned, particularly the House Republicans are concerned about the emergency services that the governor has. They're saying they're not going to support a bonding bill unless those are given up. Although that seems to have softened a bit, so we'll see what happens there. One of the things that's been a positive for it passage is that there was some things done as far as the some of the taxes, and so there was some support gained from that. Police reform, again, continues to be a major issue in that there's several caucuses down there that are saying they won't support a bonding bill without pretty stringent police reform. So it's still in play. I talked to all the legislators yesterday. Everybody's pretty optimistic, but they told me to keep holding my breath, so that's why I'm a little blue in the face. So with that, I'd stand to answer any questions that y'all may have.
It's always good to get a legislative report from you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's, I hope I don't have to do that next year. Let's just put it that way. Well, I'd like to do it, but maybe on another issue.
Yeah, I know, it depends a lot on that, whether it's gonna be 7.5 or whether it's gonna be a different figure.
Yeah,
A lower
Mr. Chairman, we asked for 8.5 originally, but what's been agreed to is 7.5. The total bonding bill is just under $1.4 million, and that's just for the general obligation funding. We're also going to be funding, you know, highways and things like that. The total's about the total package is about $1.8 billion, which is less than the what the governor was asking for, a little over $2 billion, and the House chair was asking for almost $3 billion in a House.
So if we get less money for that building or that solid waste, where are we gonna get the extra $1 million from, or do we?
Well, Mr. Chairman, one of the things, and we've talked about this, and we'll have to get real serious about it, we have some reserve that we're going to apply towards it, but we also are going to have to bond for some of it as well. And that's some of the discussions that we've started, but it's just been very, very preliminary. And again, it really depends on how much money we're going to get from the state.
The financial plan does call for, you know, bonding of a certain portion of it, you know, and then the principal and interest has been incorporated based on that.
That's where Lori comes in and brings her the checkbook with her.
That's right.
Okay, very good.
Just write a check.
Okay. No, I was concerned, I mean, when you're talking $1 million, that's a big
Well,
difference.
Mr. Chairman, I think the, you know, the total bonding is going to be, you know, significantly higher than that. What that number is going to be is still up in the air.
Hoping, yeah.
Well, it does change. You're right, it does change what we're going to have to come up with locally by that $1 million based on what we were planning for with 8.5, so.
Yeah. Okay, any further questions?
I have one more question here on page 76. And I see that the 717 is there, and we had 2.5 million in the budget for 2019. That was for the expansion, and it's not in the 2020 budget. And of course, that also would have meant that there would have been revenue dollars, the bonding dollars that would have offset that. So, but there was a depreciation line item of 700,000 in 2020. That is not in the 2021 budget. But in the 2020 budget, there was no line item for internal service fund.
Right, we didn't start until this year. We can certainly do it still, even though it's not in the budget, because it's not a levy item.
Okay.
So we can certainly still do it for 2020.
Yeah, I guess I was, you know, from an enterprise fund standpoint, and again, you don't write a check for depreciation, right? So I'm trying to think of revenues to offset expenses, and you get, you know, hopefully you have enough money coming in to pay what's going out. Other than we do the internal service line item, you basically do write a check to a separate account for.
What we'll do is we'll just reserve fund balance.
Okay.
So we won't actually be transferring it to the internal service fund, we'll just reserve fund balance.
Okay. Okay. So, so why, why was there 700,000 in depreciation and in 2020, but not 2021?
I think that's just a mistake, we'll have to add that.
Okay. Even though from the standpoint of cash flow, the depreciation it's a non-existent. Is that something Gadsby requires?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, you may want to explain who Gatsby is for anybody who
Well,
might be listening.
those are state and federal guidelines that,
Governmental accounting standards.
yeah, governmental accounting standards, so. Okay, I don't have any more questions.
No, I mean, we get these right before the meeting, we haven't, you don't get time to review, so I would just recommend that as we keep these things and go over them, and look at them and get acquainted with them, because, you guys work on the budget, I'm not that great of a budget person, but,
Well, Mr. Chairman, I should point out that, I did not do this by myself. Commissioner Whalen were involved, and Commissioner Campbell were involved. Lori was involved,
Yeah.
Steve was involved, my whole staff was involved. So and Matt Evans, our consultant, has been involved. So we've had a lot of people who have been very, very involved with this.
no, I appreciate that, and that's good. For us to review this now and say, well, I got a question here and I got a question there. It's gonna be tough to come up with questions right now, but I think we should review these budgets and look at them, get acquainted with them, just to get ourselves acquainted with them,
Chairman, I agree with you. The one thing, and I say this all the time, the older I get, the more questions I have and the fewer answers I have. So
Yeah.
it makes for interesting.
Well, it's just that I think, as we go over some of this stuff, we may have a question next week or the week after on the budget as we keep reviewing these things, and I'm sure Steve will go through that real close, because I know he's gonna come in with a lower budget this year, along with Lori's help and stuff like that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you much.
And next, we're gonna have Janelle Cheney with probation,
Good morning.
with more good news.
Yes, only. For our budget, we, like others, remain consistent. Where you're going to see an increase will be related to salaries and fringe. We continue with 3 support staff that are county employees, and then we have 6 agents that are contracted with the county that work out of that office. I believe 5 are within this budget, and then one of our agents is the drug court agent, and that's under a different budget. So pretty much all of our line items stayed consistent with what we proposed last year, and we've stayed within our budget, so no increase is needed. One of the areas that kind of fluctuates and is sort of an unknown, but we stay within the budget, is the drug testing supplies, and then what needs to be sent in and confirmed with a lab.
So are you saving any money this year, like on sentence to serve? They're not going out there so far, are they, or are they out?
Our STS crew was hindered from having a crew for a period of time. It was probably 2.5 months. The crew leader did what he could individually. He stayed connected with different townships and completed different tasks by himself. Probably a couple weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, he was able to begin a crew again. He's not able to take anyone out of the jail yet. I think that the jail just doesn't want to expose people that they know are safe, healthy, and those kind of things. So he is taking out a crew of 2 within the community. He can only transport 2 people at a time to allow for that social distancing. Now the state came out and said that if you do have individuals that can drive to a site, you can organize that. So he has, from time to time, some people that have their own transportation, so he doesn't have to provide that to them. So they're meeting him at a work site. So it certainly wasn't at the level that he's completed different work duties in the past, but tried to help out different communities during this time. A lot of, like, he was on campus, I think primarily Wednesdays for a period of time, while the county buildings were, had less staff and traffic flow. He was cleaning carpets and washing floors and cleaning or doing some of the sanitizing and those kind of things, so
Okay.
tried to stay somewhat busy. Our agents modified their contacts to include virtual visits with their clients. Some of them are doing face-to-face contacts, but maintaining that social distance. Doing drug testing, we modified it to include oral testing only so that the client could provide the specimen and step back, and then the agent could read it. Otherwise, you're, doing urine collection and those kind of things is within too close of being in their bubble.
I noticed now the jails are trying to, early release of prisoners, stuff like that. So do you have more probation cases then because of that?
Yes, we do. We had a huge influx from the prisons, released people early. Some of it was related to, who would be eligible, early work release, knowing that they wouldn't be working, came to us. Institutions that were affected by COVID, they tried to release that population, those that were eligible early, to get them to a healthy situation that wouldn't expose them to COVID-19. Some of the people that are released early are quarantined, but our caseloads definitely have been impacted and will continue to. In addition to that, the Department of Corrections has began to lay off staff because of our deficit in our budget. They started with our MinCorp in the metro area, and some of the staff related with our programming. And so we're starting to see the staff that's laid off has the option to either take the layoff or start to bump other staff depending on their classification. And so we're hoping that it won't come out as far as Moorhead. So far it hasn't affected our staff locally, but it's just in the beginning phases. I think they contacted the staff that's in phase 2, and I think there's 3 phases total.
Okay.
Good question.
Go ahead.
Janelle, can you walk me through the salary line items again?
Yep.
I'm curious again why 2018 and 19 were so far over budget. And then it seems like we're really low for this year, obviously because of what you just said, but can you just talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So the first one, salaries that are regular, pertain to the agents. And so where you're probably going to see an influx is if someone resigns or retires. We haven't had a retirement within the contract office, so I'm assuming that it has to do with a resignation, and then whoever backfills that position, it could be someone of a higher classification. If it was an agent that resigned and it was backfilled by a career agent, you're going to see a huge influx that we wouldn't be aware of. The second item, salaries part-time, that is the county OAS position. That's a .8. We shouldn't have any overtime, and we don't. Clerical salaries, that's the 2 full-time support staff that we have. And we did have a resignation 2 years ago. And so we backfilled that with a new staff. Does that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I get it, and I'm understanding it, but it just seems to me that your salaries are so far, the actuals are so far over what's budgeted. I mean, significantly. I mean, if the 2019 actual was 476,326, and the budgeted for 2020 is only 350,136.
And I received that from the state.
Okay.
They project the salaries and fringe for us. The staff that's in that position, along with their medical choice, if it's family or single, those kind of things. And so that's what they've provided would be the bill back amount.
Just a quick comment, when we budget, the 6105 line item is for those contract agents.
Okay.
And then we've got the part-time line and we've got the clerical salaries, we break those out because those are county folks. But when the money gets expended, it all gets expended out of that 6105 line item.
Okay, so that's why there's not actuals in the
Right, and
next two.
that's because of our e-time. Our e-time doesn't allow us to
Okay.
put amounts in anything about that 6105.
Okay, that helps. Sorry, I thought I was losing
And I
it for a
think we
second.
talked about that last year. I don't know if there's.
That could be.
Like, I
just
need to make a
refresh
note
me.
of.
That's fine. That makes sense, thank you.
Okay. Any further questions?
Not of Janelle.
Okay, you want to go through some more there, or you got more to add?
We're hoping to increase revenue. We started with facilitating a MAD program here in Clay County. COVID-19, we were no longer able to facilitate it with people coming in, and so they're doing that online now. Once things change, and we do hope to facilitate in-person MAD panel again. I'm just not sure when that will occur. When we do that locally, the MAD organization donates $200 to $300 to the county, and we put that into our revenue budget. The other revenue that we have is the supervision fees, which kind of fluctuate as well. And then we're also looking, right before COVID-19, we were in discussion with the jail staff, the correctional center and their program there to combine efforts with the Department of Corrections, was looking to have bed availability to house people locally that could access some programming. And so Julie and I had talked about an evidence-based program that we could facilitate her staff within the facility and then our staff within the community. And so right before things kind of changed, we were organizing the ability to have that training provided to staff. It's called Decision Points. And so I'm inquiring if they're providing that virtually now, that we could sort of move forward with the training process. But it would be beneficial if they were able to start that program within the correctional facility, and then when they come back out in the community, that our staff would be facilitating the same program. And we could assess a fee for the people attending that program. Those that would be deemed indigent, we would cover, though we would waive those fees or cover those fees for them. And that way we could continue providing some rehabilitative programming within the community, some things along the lines of restorative justice and education. I think that's really beneficial in looking at the justice reform, looking at comparing what is done in the juvenile system, where there's a lot of attention given to how long someone is held in a placement, looking for the right programming, and looking at what level of placement that we do with youth. Sometimes our adults are held longer than, and it has more of a negative impact. They're losing jobs and not gaining education, or not focused on changing behavior per se. It's sitting some time. And so really supporting the program, that the resources that the correctional facility already has, trying to enhance that with an evidence-based program. And again, the Department of Corrections was looking at some of their supervised release, having beds available, keeping Clay County residents in Clay County instead of sending them to a prison, and allowing them to stay within their community and access that if it was, I believe, 90 days and less. So hopefully we can get there. That was one of the things that was on the platter to move towards.
Now, you said, some revenue generation things is the supervision of some of these people. So who pays for the supervision of this, that we would get funds in there? Just the parolee or?
Yep, and so anyone, juveniles aren't assessed a fee, but adults that are placed on supervision for a misdemeanor offense pay $100 flat fee. Gross misdemeanor offenses pay $200, and then felony offenders pay $300 supervision fees. And so we only have one agent supervising the client. And so if the client has a felony level offense and also a gross misdemeanor or a misdemeanor, we would collect the $300 and then also collect the $200 or $100. And the Department of Corrections has allowed us to keep the $200 or $100 local and give that back to the county, regardless of who's supervising them. So everybody placed on supervision, other than juveniles, does pay their assessed a supervision fee.
So who pays for the juveniles? Does the county pay for that, or there's just no charge for juveniles?
There's no charge to them individually, and so the county pays part of that and the state pays part of that, because they're a contracted position.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify in my questions earlier, I made it sound like you'd been spending over $100,000 more. And so when you add those together, you really come in under what your budget is by about 18,000. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Anything further?
No.
Well, thank you for giving us
All right.
up-to-date report on
Yes.
probation.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple more questions going back to solid waste, so you don't have to come up here, but well, no, I wanted.
Come on up.
Thanks, Janelle.
I wanted you to be able to hear the questions, because my questions are gonna be of Lori, but I just wanted you to, so if I can, Mr. Chair, if I can go back to the existing landfill budget. For the 2020 budget, we line itemed the $2.5 or $22.5 million expense of the landfill expansion.
Right.
So on the bottom of the page, it actually ends up showing 3.9 million expenditures over revenues. So I thought our intent was going to be that we were going to bond for that 2.5 million. So that was just going to come out of reserves then? Is that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that was for the landfill expansion. What we talked about was that we were going to take that out of the reserves.
Okay.
And those line items typically fluctuate greatly, so from millions of dollars to nothing from year to year.
Right.
And sometimes it gets spent and sometimes it doesn't.
And that's, Mr. Chairman, that's one of the problems with the solid waste budget in general is that the flows and ebbs. And that's why we're trying to do the best we can as far as planning ahead, and that's why it may not be real clear as far as what we're doing.
Well, I just want to make sure that I understand and that $2.5 million was.
Yeah, that was from fund balance.
The intention was to come from fund balance?
Yes.
Okay, and so knowing that, I'd be interested in to find out what fund balance would exist after that.
It's about seven. Mr. Chairman, I think it's about $7 million.
Yeah, but I want to know what portion of the the fund is not restricted.
Okay, I don't have that off the top of my head.
Because we do have a restricted portion of that 7 million, which is for foreclosure and that type of thing. Yeah. I guess the reason that I want to make that clear is as we plan for this next phase, knowing that we need another $1 million because the bond was 7.5 instead of 8.5 on the transfer station, I want to I just want to know that we're all on the same page when it comes to that will be a bond.
Right, yes.
And we will then be incorporating a principal and interest line item on the annual budget based on the bond.
We will be incorporating interest.
An interest and a depreciation line.
Correct.
Which those two would equal the payment, more than likely.
Well, in the past, like in juvenile detention, that depreciation line item coincidentally has been about the same.
Right.
It's different now, and so we're having to make some adjustments when we're coming up with a fee for juvenile detention.
Mhm.
So it may or may not be close, but the bond payment will reduce the liability rather than be an expense. So that's why we don't budget it as an expense.
So for the potential, what's the number out of pocket that we're anticipating now for the,
Mr. Chairman, I think we're looking at about $7.5 million.
yeah, because it was about 6 points, so
Yeah.
about 7.5 million. So are we gonna show that as a one-year line item then?
Yes, 1 or 2, depending on how long it's gonna take to build.
Yeah, it'll probably start, if we get the money, it'll start this year and finish next. Okay. Okay. All right, I just wanted to.
And Mr. Chairman, we do have the information you're asking. One of the things that I was concerned about too, and I'm always concerned about how much we have in the reserve. But as Lori mentioned, I mean, we're trying the best we can to budget ahead and realizing that we're going to have some of those obligations as we move forward, so.
And just to go back to that 717,000,
Yes.
the number that was in there originally, I made some adjustments. The way it was calculated originally was backwards. It was reducing, the amortization schedule was actually reducing the cost and increasing. But then I changed the life on a couple of the bigger items.
Oh.
So that's why I brought it down.
Like the bull mag or something?
No, it was the landfill, cell replacement.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so a couple of line items, I extended the life on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Before you go, Kirk, I want to thank you for sending out, last night I was at the Morgan Township meeting or picnic, whatever they want to call it, and you sent Shannon out there, a very good report. I mean, she really, your department showed a good representation of the county, and I appreciate her
Thank you, Mr.
presentation.
Chairman. I'll pass that on to her. I appreciate all the work all my people do. I'm really proud of all my folks. Got a really,
Yeah.
really good crew.
I don't know how many people are invited to come out to that picnic or not, but she was out there and she gave, I mean, she had the interest of the people there for 15 minutes, half hour, probably a half hour, you know. It was just very good presentation.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll go into committee reports. This week, we're going to start with Jim.
Okay. Let's see. On Wednesday, I attended the virtual meeting of the Northwest Emergency Communications Board, along with Commissioner Wayland, and we heard usual reports from the different entities that take part in that, and nothing was unusual, but that's all I have for a report this week.
Okay, Grant?
Jim just reported on that, the radio board. Then I had a detention budget meeting with James we did last week to go over the detention budget regarding our upcoming meeting, our board meeting. And then I had a diversion update meeting with Joel Paulson, and that was it for me.
Okay, Jenny?
Thank you. Last week, I attended the SWCD meeting. They approved several different cost shares for buffer implementation and cover crop. Had an update from Gabe on buffer strip implementation. I had talked with Gabe earlier in the week. They're starting to move into the enforcement aspect. There are a couple land owners that still aren't working forward in implementing that, and so we'll have to have some discussions between the county attorney's office, planning and zoning director will also be a part of that, but I appreciate that Gabe is continuing to keep us up to speed on what that is. There are dollars that came from the state that could be used for legal avenues if we needed, that are earmarked for 2020, so that is available. that's one of the things we had a discussion several years ago about if somebody didn't implement it and we need to do the legal route, who pays for it?
Yeah, who's gonna do the enforcing, yeah.
Thankfully, there is still 2020 funds available. I think I'm hopeful that those landowners will still work with the SWCD on that, but I appreciate the SWCD's work in terms of reaching out to folks, because they really have done a good job there.
I mean, I talked to Gabe about that too, and as far as doing it, I mean, if they don't do it, do we do it, or? I
From the
mean, the
discussions
soil
that I
water.
had is that then SWCD would plant the buffers, and then the cost would be added to the tax roll, correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay,
And
very
and
good.
it's our role as a county to make sure that that's enforced.
Enforced.
Okay, very good.
But I will say that the percentage of people that have already put that in is huge.
So I think
So
we're talking 20 parcels or
20
less.
parcels, yeah. And some of those parcels are owned by one or two of the same people. So, anyways, they also discussed the mower rates and I mean, they're still staying quite busy in terms of, in this land of COVID, how they're navigating that. They have had some costs that have been incurred because of COVID in terms of technology and a laptop for staff, just to make sure that they're able to go remote, so that may be a CARES request. I just want to thank the virtual Clay County Achievement Days went on. A lot of these kids that would have gone to the Clay County Fair, the Extension office worked hard to make sure that there was an avenue for them, so I want to thank the Extension staff and the interns that are paid for through the Glendon Farms grant really worked hard on getting that launched, so thank you to staff. And then last night I virtually attended the Buffalo Red Watershed meeting. They discussed ditch spraying. They're moving forward on a lot of that. They are in the process of possibly adding the Wolverton Creek Coulee project on there. That's recently been completed. It looks great out there, but making sure that they stay ahead in any weeds if necessary. A number of projects that they had approved in fixing certain areas. They did appoint a new member to the MCC JPA. Jerry Van Amberg was now appointed to that. Talked about working with Riverton Township. There's some issues on the 145th Street drainage. Discussed Larry Henry's NRCS field review. Another item of note is our County Road 8 project. They were approached by a landowner with the huge rains that we've had. One of the center line culverts was placed 6 or 8 inches above grade, so they are going to work with Highway to make sure that they're going to have to get that out before they pave in the next 2 weeks to reset that. There's another culvert along the Comstock Coulee, I think it's 130th Avenue, where the culvert under the road has broken apart, and so there are 3 huge holes through the road, so make sure to bring that up to Dave today during your highway.
On what road is that on?
I believe it's 130th, and it's in that second mile, so it's 20th some street. It's across from Corky Wallstead's place, where the Comstock Coulee goes through. I don't know if the culverts are broken apart or what. But. And then they had an HR committee report from Kathy Affield in terms of going forward with having their own staff. She was making the recommendation to go forward with that. I was served on that committee and just had asked questions in terms of what the final cost to the district will be in terms of health insurance and if they've had those numbers, and it sounds like they don't have that information yet. I'd say that the board really had a really good discussion in terms of weighing the pros and cons of having internal administration, and I think the board's fairly split, but they will be discussing that later on. And just in thinking as you move forward in planning for the intergovernmental retreat in whatever capacity that may be, I think that listening to what's going on nationwide, I think having some sort of discussion on race relations and the climate of that in Clay County would be a good talking point. That concludes my reports.
Going back to your Riverton, I think, you're probably not acquainted with it, but I've been working with them quite several meetings with the township there.
I know that
Do
Mark,
they plan on doing something there, that ditch? Because I know,
Mark Carr has really approached them in terms of what the concerns are, and so I don't know if it's a cleaning issue, but they're going to work with the water, or the township, whatever that may be.
okay.
You're probably better acquainted with what the actual issue is.
Yeah, I've met with Archie Tanner several times already on that problem there, so.
It sounds like there's two problems, correct? There's two different issues possibly?
Yeah, not acquainted enough. with
Okay,
it.
well, I know that they
mean,
will work with the township.
Evidently they got it on their schedule. Very good. Glad to hear that. Kevin?
Thank you. On July 7th, we did have a detention budget committee meeting. Couple of things to note coming out of there is the revenues over expenditures for 2019 are very good. They're $1 million. And I think that is a tribute to what we talked about with this expansion, the ability to have more beds, and which also means that we've brought in a lot of additional outside revenue. The good news for Clay County now, and you'll see coming up here shortly, is with the 2-year look back that we have, Clay County's annual commitment going forward will be significantly less. I think it's a couple $100,000 less, if I'm not mistaken. So that whole thing is working out really well, that expansion process. Then on Thursday the 9th, we had a diversion chairs executive coordination meeting. A couple of things of note on there that we talked about was in North Dakota, their oil revenues that were obviously down due to this whole COVID deal. And of course, the State Water Commission has asked all projects within the state that have been allocated funds if there's any areas where they can de-obligate on a short-term basis to help with their cash flows until those oil prices come up. And through our staff, we've recognized that there's $23 million of money that we currently we're banking on that we don't need right away. So I think that will be the message going back, is that, if need be, we can get by without that $23 million. Now, keep in mind, $23 million on a $1.75 billion project is kind of small, but at least in the next 12-month period, it's not look like they would spend all of what they've been, gotten obligated from the state on. So, and then the other good news is that it looks like we're scheduled to close on the WIFIA funding in late September and early October. And for those who may not know, that WIFIA funding is through the federal government, and with that WIFIA funding, it'll save that project roughly $500 million over the life of the project in interest costs. So it's an incredibly good deal for this area. Then yesterday afternoon, we did have a construction update meeting with the landfill. Kirk had talked a little bit about that, and we met out at the landfill operation, and we got to see where the new cell is going and the work they've done and progressed on that. So that's all looking good. So that concludes my report.
Mr. Chairman, I forgot a meeting that I attended, and that was on Wednesday last week. I attended the City of Moorhead Planning Commission meeting online, and we approved a variance for impermeable surfaces for DS Beverages in North Moorhead to expand on the All-Star Bowl property. And then we also turned down a request to rezone the apartment building remodel project at 404 7th Street South, right behind Corsmo Funeral Home. There were a number of neighbors that attended the virtual meeting that objected to that, especially to the proposed retail space on the main floor of 1,800 square feet was the main reason. The developer was not opposed to removing the commercial portion and remaining residential. And also discussed was the neighborhood approach to setting the impervious surface regulations in new residential housing projects going forward. And since then, we were notified by the planning department at the city of Moorhead that the developer has rescinded the request for that approval in the first place. So it's going to stay an apartment building for affordable housing, it sounds like.
Okay.
That was my addendum.
Okay, the two items I had last Wednesday, virtual meeting with the Wildlife Watershed Board. Other than the usual permits and going through all the things, the one thing, Mariah gave a good report on the one watershed, one plan, where we're pretty much on board on that as far as the progress on that. So that's going along good there. And the other thing they talked about was, which probably a lot of watersheds or even counties, the land acquisition. Sometimes when you do a project, you have a land acquisition if you do a road project or anything like that. And they were talking about, are they knowledgeable enough to do all this stuff, or should they hire someone to do the land acquisition for them? So had a lot of good discussion on that. Last night I attended the Morgan Township meeting, and I already expressed to Kirk on the report that Shannon gave there, and it was just, he was just proud to be there. Mark was there, and some of his deputies were there, and they gave just a tremendous report on what's going to happen in the county as far as their departments, and it was just a very good presentations by Mark, and also Cody brought the canine dog out there and gave just a great presentation. It really helped those people. I mean, I think they had half hour, 45 minutes. They talked about that stuff, and it just really went good. It was a very good meeting. I was proud to be part of Clay County there, and glad to see Mark out there and Shannon out there. Just made me proud to be part of it. Those were the two meetings I had. There's just one thing, I noticed that September meeting, I think, isn't that canceled? The policy committee in Alexandria, has that been canceled, or did I read that wrong?
I haven't seen that yet. I'll check into it.
I thought that policy committee meeting, I thought I saw something that was, probably I read it wrong, so, okay. Probably thinking of something else. Very good.
Mr. Chair, if I can just add one thing to the juvenile budget that we talked about. If you recall, early on last year, there were some times when some of our members had to be turned back because of rear capacity before these beds became available. And in this new process now, and part of what that $1 million does is it will compensate all of those counties that were turned back. It'll compensate them for their cost of having to pay to have them go someplace else. In that process, we're still counting those people within their daily use in our facility, so that their numbers on the 2-year look back are still accurate. Because if we're going to pay to have them be someplace else, then they're also got to be included in their annual usage. So in case you're getting inquiries when we go to AMC functions or whatever, that's going to be also good news to those counties, that they're going to get reimbursed for those additional costs that they had when we were short of space for them. So.
Okay. I guess before we go to Steve, Brian, did you have anything to report in the district courts, how they're doing, or are they back in session? Is there anything you can give us on that, or?
I think really what Steve said is very accurate. We talked a lot about it. The Supreme Court order of wearing masks started on Monday. I think that's going fine. They're opening the courts up more for more contested hearings, that kind of thing. But they have to have it blessed off by their commission to allow us to go forward with jury trials. And so that's not, it's supposed to start on July 21st was going to be the first potential trial. That's not going to happen now. They're going to probably move that back to probably about August 21st. Potential. So they have to get everything blessed off by the Chief Justice and the Commission from each district. So we'll see where that goes, and then they have to answer a lot of safety questions, how they're gonna protect children and that kind of thing come in. So we're probably still a good month and a half out before we can see our first jury trial.
Steve, are we all set up with that extra judge coming in and stuff like that? Is that the process all done there?
Yes, so we did start prior to COVID. I believe that courtroom was shut down for roughly 2 months.
About 2 months. She was here, so referee Solheim is in, and she's been doing a lot of good work with, she covers all the commitments and the child support court and all those kind of things. Well, when COVID hit, we cut way down on what we're doing on those types of things, but she's back now full-time, taking all those types of hearings again. Doing a great job.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, then, Steve. Sorry for the delay, but go.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. Last Tuesday, I attended with Commissioner Whalen Campbell the juvenile center budget that's been discussed. We also, later that day, had the meeting with Kirk and Lori and the solid waste budget that was presented this morning. Wednesday, we went through the probation budget with Janelle. This coming Thursday, last week, this board approved having a coronavirus relief fund allocation committee, and we're scheduled to meet this coming Thursday morning. And prior to that, we had some different meetings. I did reach out to some of our local cities in Clay County, when either their administrators or council person, just to ensure awareness of the dollars available, kind of overview of the funds for maybe those that weren't as knowledgeable of the dollars, and then kind of discuss some ideas of allocations if they've had any of those within their cities. And I also reached out to Gene Ward from the townships, so provided a number of municipalities and agencies, I guess, the paperwork they would need to receive the funds. Then on the 9th at County Management, we heard from Kathy on an update. We talked about the budget process and again this upcoming special session that started yesterday. That afternoon we went with Information Services on their budget that we heard this morning. On the 10th, participated in the city county administrator meeting locally here. We talked a lot about the CARES funding and also welcomed Dan Molly to our group, who's their acting city manager in Moorhead. Yesterday we met with Kathy McKay on a series of COVID-related issues. Also, we had budget discussions on the city attorneys and social services, and I participated in a portion of the landfill construction meeting via phone. And finished the day up talking with Derek LaPointe on some CARES ad COVID relief issues. Just a reminder, tomorrow is our last day of accepting letters of interest for Buffalo Red water managers. We'll be doing interviews before this board next week for those that are interested. And also for our citizens, just a reminder, tax day is coming up on the 15th, so get those taxes in. And that concludes my report.
Anything further?
I did forget something, sorry.
Go for it.
Last week I had my Community Action Housing Advisory Committee, and good updates in terms of what's going on for housing advocacy in the area. There's some discussion in terms of how COVID has affected landlords and tenants with the eviction moratorium, and I would guess there would be some sort of CARES funding request for those areas as well. That concludes my report.
Okay. And with that, we're adjourned.